Lieutenant Commander Eric Voss had been holding Outpost Cygnus 7 for 43 days, which was approximately 42 days longer than anyone expected. The Kyler Empire had swept through this sector with the kind of overwhelming force that made resistance seem quaint and surrender seem inevitable. Every other military installation had either capitulated or been annihilated. Cygnus 7 should have fallen in the first week, but Eric had civilians to evacuate, 2,000 researchers, families, support staff who'd been studying stellar phenomena when the Kyler invasion began. The outpost wasn't designed for defense, it was a scientific facility with some basic security. Eric's garrison had started at 40 soldiers. Now it was just him, surrounded by automated defenses running on backup power and running critically low on ammunition. The last evacuation shuttle had departed 6 hours ago, carrying the final group of civilians. Eric had watched it clear the gravity well, watched it jump to FTL, and then returned to the command center to wait for what came next. What came next was Empress Shalvessa herself. The Kyler ruler didn't typically oversee minor outpost conquests, but apparently Eric's 43-day defense had attracted attention. Her flagship emerged from FTL with an escort that could have leveled a planet. The Kyler were imposing even by galactic standards, tall and powerful, with distinctive pointed ears that could track sound with unsettling precision and skin that darkened from bronze to obsidian when they entered combat fury. They'd conquered hundreds of systems through tactical superiority and overwhelming force. The communication came directly from the Empress. Human commander of Outpost Cygnus 7, you have fought well, but your position is untenable. Surrender with honor. We offer prisoner exchange and medical treatment. There is no shame in yielding to superior force. Eric looked around the battered command center. Cracked view screens, flickering lights, damage alerts scrolling across every console. His automated defenses were at 23% ammunition. Life support was running on emergency reserves. He had maybe 6 hours of combat capability left, optimistically. But the civilians were clear, every single one. 2,000 people who'd made it home because Eric and his garrison had held the line for 43 impossible days. He opened the channel. Negative, Empress. Civilians are clear. I'm done running. The silence that followed was long enough that Eric wondered if the transmission had failed. Then Shalvessa's voice came back, carrying something that sounded like genuine confusion. You refuse honorable surrender? For what purpose? There is nothing left to defend. Maybe not, Eric said, too tired to be diplomatic. But there's still me, and I'm not done yet. He closed the channel before she could respond and began preparing what remained of his defenses for one final stand. Empress Shalvessa had personally overseen 17 major conquests. She understood military tactics, strategic calculation, the mathematics of acceptable losses versus strategic gains. What she didn't understand was why a single human would choose certain death over honorable surrender when there was literally nothing left to protect. The outpost is tactically worthless, her chief military advisor said. We can destroy it from orbit in minutes. No, Shalvessa said, her skin shifting to thoughtful bronze. I want to know what drives this defiance. Send ground forces, measured approach. Give this human one final chance to see reason. The Kyler assault force landed expecting quick capitulation once the lone defender saw warriors in person. Instead, they encountered defensive positions that shouldn't have been possible for one person to maintain. Automated turrets with targeting patterns that predicted Kyler assault tactics. Corridors rigged with improvised barriers that forced attackers into kill zones. A single human voice over the comm system, calmly adjusting defensive protocols like he was running a full garrison instead of fighting alone. The Kyler forces took casualties. Not catastrophic, 3 dead, 7 wounded, but more than they'd expected from what intelligence called a defeated outpost with minimal remaining defenses. Shalvessa watched the battle feeds from her flagship, her skin darkening slightly with combat interest. The human was good. More than good, he was exceptional, using every tactical advantage, fighting smart rather than desperate. But he had to know he couldn't win. The math was inexorable. Yet he kept fighting with a precision that suggested he wasn't panicking or hoping for miracle rescue. He was fighting because what? He's not trying to win, Shalvesa said aloud, realization dawning. He's fighting because surrender isn't acceptable to him, regardless of outcome. Her advisor's ears flicked with confusion, a very Kyler expression of not understanding. That's illogical. He's accomplished his objective. The civilians evacuated. Dying here serves no purpose. Perhaps purpose isn't the point, Shalvesa murmured, and ordered her forces to pause the assault. She needed to understand this human who turned certain death into defiant choice. Eric was running on stimulants and sheer stubbornness, which was a poor substitute for sleep, water, or actual ammunition. His automated systems were failing one by one. He'd lost the Eastern Corridor defenses 6 hours ago. The northern access was down to 2 functional turrets. His rifle had maybe 3 rounds left, and he was pretty sure at least one was a dud. But he'd held them for 43 days plus 6 hours. Every minute mattered. Every hour he'd bought had gotten more civilians to safety. That had to mean something. The Kyler forces had stopped advancing, pulling back to regroup. Eric used the pause to reinforce what remained of his defenses. A futile exercise that he did anyway, because that's what you do. You fight until you can't fight anymore. Then the command center door opened, and Empress Shalvesa herself walked in, accompanied by only 2 guards. Her skin was dark bronze, not combat black, but the color Eric's cultural briefings said meant respect or serious consideration. She was tall even for Kyler, her presence commanding in a way that had nothing to do with the guards flanking her. Eric stood, swaying slightly from exhaustion, and raised his rifle with its 3 remaining rounds. "Ma'am, you're in violation of my defensive perimeter." Shalvesa's ears tilted forward, amusement, the briefings had said. "I could order this facility destroyed from orbit. Your defensive perimeter exists because I permit it." She studied him with eyes that seemed to calculate and weigh. "Why, human? You've already won. The civilians are safe. There's no tactical value in dying here." Eric managed a tired smile. "Ma'am, I held this position for 43 days so that 2,000 people who just wanted to study stars and raise their families could get home safe. Those 43 days mattered. Every hour I held mattered." He lowered the rifle slightly, too exhausted to maintain the stance. "Surrendering now, it would make it like those days didn't mean anything, like I was just delaying instead of defending. But you'll die. Probably, but I'll die knowing I did everything possible, that I held the line until there was nothing left to hold." Eric met her eyes. "That has to count for something, right? Even if it's just my own peace of mind." Shalvesa stared at this human who should have been broken, but stood defiant through while alone, covered in dust and dried blood, holding a rifle with 3 rounds against an empire. And something shifted in her understanding of what made a warrior. "You've shown me something I'd forgotten," she said quietly. "True strength isn't about the numbers you command. It's about the will you carry when numbers don't matter anymore." The ceasefire order stunned the Kyler assault force. Empress Shalvesa's declaration stunned the entire fleet. She was invoking Kelther, the warrior's recognition, for the human defender of Outpost Cygnus 7. Kelther was ancient tradition, reserved for enemies who demonstrated such exceptional courage that killing them would diminish the victor. It had been invoked maybe 12 times in 3,000 years of Kyler history. Never for a lone defender of a tactically meaningless outpost, but Shalvesa's word was absolute. Eric Voss was granted full military honors, not as prisoner, but as equal. Safe passage, medical treatment, the right to leave with honor intact. Eric, half collapsed from exhaustion as Kyler medics treated his injuries, didn't understand what was happening. Shalvesa sat with him in the battered command center and explained while her staff secured the facility. "I have conquered 17 systems, Lieutenant Commander. I've defeated armies, broken fortresses, forced surrender from forces 10 times your size." Her skin shifted through contemplative silvers. "But I've never witnessed what you showed here, absolute commitment without hope of victory. You didn't fight because you could win. You fought because those 43 days mattered, because those civilians mattered, because surrender wasn't acceptable regardless of outcome." She gestured to the damaged consoles, the blood-stained floor, the evidence of one person holding against impossible odds. "That's a kind of strength my people have forgotten in our focus on overwhelming force. We measure power in fleets, in conquered systems, in territories claimed." You've reminded me that true power is will that doesn't break even when breaking would be logical. I was just doing my job, Eric said, his voice rough from exhaustion and dehydration. No, your job was evacuation support. You accomplished that 43 days ago. Everything since has been choice, the choice to stand when standing seemed pointless. Shalvessa's skin flashed with bronze respect. That's the lesson you've taught me and my empire today. The story spread across coalition space faster than FTL communications. The Empress who granted Kelthar to a lone human defender. The lieutenant commander who held an indefensible position for 43 days and refused surrender even when he'd already won. Political analysts debated implications. Military strategists studied Eric's improvised tactics, finding genius in desperation. But 6 months later, when peace negotiations finally began, what mattered wasn't the tactical analysis or political speculation. What mattered was that Shalvessa insisted Eric attend as consultant, not for his military expertise, but because he understood something she was trying to learn. Conquest is easy, she told the assembled negotiators, her skin calm silver, Eric seated beside her as honored guest rather than defeated enemy. My empire has perfected overwhelming force. But this human showed me what we've lost in that perfection. The understanding that strength measured only in domination is hollow. That sometimes the most important victory is the one you refuse to concede even when losing. When reporters later asked Eric how it felt to face an entire empire alone, he gave his characteristic shrug. I wasn't thinking about empires. I was thinking about buying one more hour, holding one more corridor, making those 43 days mean something for the people who counted on me. Shalvessa, standing beside him with her skin the warm bronze of Kyler friendship, added, sometimes the universe needs someone willing to stand when standing seems pointless, because it's